These past few days, we have seen in Gaza scenes of a very sick culture, so evil by Western standards that I believe we must realise we really do face a clash of values, of civilisations that can't be negotiated away, that can't be solved by some peace deal. Hamas on Thursday released what it said were the bodies of Jewish hostage Shiri Bibas and her children, Ari and Kfir, taken with her 16 months ago. Hamas claimed they'd been killed in captivity by Israeli bombs, which turns out to be a lie, says Israel, after a post-mortem of the remains. The boys, it seems, were strangled.
Ariel and Kfir Bibas were murdered by terrorists in cold blood. The terrorists did not shoot the two young boys. They killed them with their bare hands. Afterwards, they committed horrific acts to cover up these atrocities.
What's more, the body of their mother, returned by Hamas, was of actually some other woman. Now, all this is one thing. Another is Hamas and the crowd crowing over the bodies of these children and their mother. They played triumphant music. The crowds cheered the coffins of the babies as they were driven past. And Palestinian children took to the stage of the handover of the coffins to chant greetings to the military wing of Hamas that had paraded the coffins of the dead baby and the dead toddler. And one final barbaric touch that a lot of the news outlets missed. Hamas even brought along some of the remaining Jewish hostages who weren't being released on that day to watch from cars the hostages who were going home, and it filmed their distress for propaganda. You could ask yourself, would Israel do something that cruel, that torture? Would any army of the West? You were seeing there not criminals, but in my view, a culture. Now, joining me is an author and scholar of the Quran, Anglican priest Mark Durie. He's written this wonderful academic text that you will not find at your local bookshop, unfortunately, The Quran and its Biblical Reflexes, which doesn't sound sexy, but about the writing of the Quran, the inspiration, how it was invented, essentially, in part from Christianity. Brilliant book. He's a senior research fellow at the Melbourne School of Theology and a writing fellow for the Middle East Forum. Mark Durie, thank you so much for your time. It seems to me inconceivable that any armed force of the West would crow over the bodies of a baby and a 4-year-old. I mean, there'd be an element of shame or sadness or gravity or whatever, but this was not. This was not. And I'm just wondering if you know of any cultural or even Quranic explanation or factor that might account for this difference.
I think it is part of the dehumanizing of the infidels, of the infidel enemies. They see these bodies as just emblems of their victory and their dominance, not as real human beings who've been tragically deprived of life by their own actions, as a result of their own actions.
I mean, I've seen no revulsion from Islamic spokespeople around the world at the scenes we've just seen, which have caused such horror in the West. None of that, and it fits into a pattern of the Islamic leaders. I'm not saying the majority of Muslim believers here, I'm saying the Islamic leadership, a failure to condemn horror after horror after horror, including October 7. The vast majority of them. It's more than a pattern here. Are we talking again about a cultural factor or a religious factor, the same sort of thing that you were just talking about?
Well, I think there is a religious factor. That is that the Quran says that Muslims are the best people that have been raised up for humankind. there's a sense of their superiority, and part of that superiority is inflicting horror or terror on disbelievers. So there's some Muslims don't see that as a problem. They see that as in fact part of Islam's destiny to rule, to incite fear. Not all Muslims, of course, think like this, but there is strong a mandate within Islamic theology for having this very differentiated view of the world, that we are superior, we are masters, we are going to dominate.
When you see that, are we facing a civilizational or religious divide that is perhaps one that you can't overcome? You've got to accept that's it and make some conclusions based on that.
Yes, I think there is a fundamental difference between a biblical worldview, which sees human beings as of inherent value, made in the image of God. Love your neighbor as yourself, which is in Leviticus. Love the outsider, the foreigner, as yourself. This is very different from an Islamic worldview, which sees men as dominant over women and believers as dominant over disbelievers. There's a fundamental asymmetry in the way human beings are viewed. Hamas is also seeking to stir up support for their cause. So these images are sent, as it were, to terrify or intimidate the West, but also to inspire true believers in their cause, which is to establish an Islamic caliphate, to manifest politically the dominance of Islam in the world, to be victorious for Allah. So they're seeking to have that dual effect, intimidate the disbelievers and encourage the believers about their success. I mean, really, when you think about it, Gaza's been destroyed. It's a horrible story, and it's a tragic story for the people of Gaza. And yet Hamas is trying to seize victory out of the ruins of their towns and cities, and that's a psychological exercise of asserting their dominance in the face of all the evidence to the contrary in terms of what they've gone through.